Who were you when this picture was taken?
Oh, 30-something, 40-something.
This is beautiful. Yeah. You have a very scholarly apartment. Very scholarly.
It's easy to put down something.
Okay.
Sure.
Oh, you're gonna.
He's gonna give me some time. Just put this, as usual this is together, I just start to change it and get in the book together.
What are you working on this one?
This is a book dedicated to John Clark. John Henry Clark, you see. This is me front here, and then I start here. This is dedication to John Clark, Dr. Clark. We gave our dedication to Dr. John Henry Bobo Clark as he makes a great and mighty work. Then here is going to be John Clark. It's all John Clark. Dr. Dignitaries and local unveil John Clark. And this is John Clark. About him, the new
street.
The street naming to John Clark. The Wrangler and his wife and everything. John Clark. This is the town meeting they have for John Clark. And it ends. the dedication to John Clark. Then I start a book. It's a book of African history and the different aspects of African history. This will cover the cases, John Clark, and different things that happened and all. But this book is dedicated to John Clark.
Can I? What I wanted to have a seat, Dr. Ben, wherever you're most comfortable. In doing this dedication to Dr. Clark, Dr. Clark meant a lot to you.
I knew him for just a slight bit of 60 years.
60
years.
Tell me about
He's
how you met him.
He's 2 years older than I am. And I know him out in just the beginning of World War II, just that time, I know him. I come up here from Puerto Rico, where my parents lived, of course, and I had a child. I was married, had a daughter, and then I came here because it became impossible for me to live in Puerto Rico, my father said, because I had gone against my class as they had it at the time. And I had to change profession because I didn't like law, even though I had graduated and passed and so forth. And I had gone against my class, as my father put it, at my group. And so I had to come up here. But I was going to Arthur Schomburg to speak to him about black people, since he was the one that started the museum. And I've been there the same day that John got there. And John asked Arthur, Dr. Schomburg, what about our enemies? Who is our enemies? Who we are? And Arthur told us, go back and read what your enemy are. Who are your enemies? What they did to you. Then come back and ask the same question again. What is the history of the African people? And that we were both told to come back in 2 weeks. We went back the same time in 2 weeks, and Arthur started to tell us about ourselves. And he had given us enough to start us back in research. Books we didn't know existed. Right there in the library. The library being, we used to see the old building, not the one in the corner. The one in the corner is a new building. But right, the second building used to be, the library was in the back.
Yes.
And the Schomburg library was in the front. You had to go in the front and the second floor to go over to the first floor of the next library. I forget that library name is County College Library. And that began the friendship. John eventually was to go towards the Marxist side. And I couldn't do that. I was Garveyite. As a kid from home, I had seen Morris Davis, Aviso Campo, and all these men are nationalists of those places, the islands. And I had heard about Garvey long ago, so that I came here a Garveyite, which was contrary to my father's position. Even though my father was when people like, he was not a Garveyite. I was the Garveyite. Contrary to what my father and mother wanted me to be.
Your father wanted you to be a lawyer.
Well, he wanted me not only to be a lawyer like himself, but he wanted my political ideas to be non-political. To hold no political view. But to the contrary, I was building a political, because I was living not in luxury, but I was living. I could eat. My father both and my mother both professional. I could eat daily, but I had seen the fangito.
What's the fangito?
In Puerto, this is the worst thing you could see, where people live in desperation. People eating for garbage, for different, for eating what they could get. When the U.S. Marines and the U.S. Navy had a base there in Puerto Rico, and people would go down to the dump, the Navy dump, and wash bones and wash the bone and eat. People were desperate. People was dropped dead in those days. I had lived through that. When I go into high school, I was lucky that I had one sister. She is up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. She's up to about 20 years older than myself. And speaking. I can't give her no answer. I don't know. She wants to speak about something for the bank, but I can't give her an answer. I got to call you.
So you had lived through that poverty.
Yes, I had seen the poverty. Puerto Rico was nothing but poverty, rich and poor, not rich and in that. The middle class Puerto Rico, you couldn't tell them from the rich, because they shop the same place, they buy food the same place. They did everything the same place. And then you had the poor. You had no middle class, hardly any middle class. And I had come and I experienced my youth in Puerto Rico and in the U.S. Virgin Islands in such a youth.
How old were you when you came here to America?
20. I came in the carousel. The carousel was a dredge. I was a man then. I was a man with a child in my early 20s.
And so, did you meet Dr. Clark right after you came here? How long were you here?
I wasn't here for no time. I had come here to my uncle, Caspar Hussein, and he was the number system man. He and Alex Pompey. They brought the number system here from Cuba. That time Cuba was headed by Batista.
You said you mean the numbers that we played?
They brought the numbers to America.
You mean the numbers we
Caspar
played?
Hussein, my uncle, my mother's uncle, and Alex Pompey brought the number system to the United States. And then they got Madam Walker, and they bankrolled Madam Walker.
And they collected the numbers, so that was a big business.
They ran the number. The system here, my uncle had a parlor, a gambling parlor right side where the new Schambug is, was my uncle's parlor. He had a number of places, but that was the main parlor.
So they did pretty well.
Oh, yeah. My uncle didn't work a day. I mean, didn't do no hard work.
Right.
Especially when they framed him and put him in jail, then he used to work as a apparent doorman at Smallest Paradise. But he wasn't a doorman. He put down that... he was.
Talk about Harlem a little bit in those days, and if you can talk about...
Well, Harlem as far as the people concerned. It was the whites were moving out. The Jews were in the center of Harlem. The Jews lived in Lenox Avenue, 7th Avenue, Lenox and 7th Avenue, and St. Nicholas Avenue. Then the Irish lived on Amsterdam over, and the Italian lived on 5th Avenue over to the east side. That was, and the blacks were moving in from downtown. The blacks we had lived downtown, mixing with the very poor whites, up to as far as 59th Street, where the Coliseum was. Where the Coliseum was owned by the Catholic Church. And that time they had the row houses there. That's long before the Coliseum. And the black over there and down was Hell's Kitchen.
Right.
Hell's Kitchen. And live poor whites, mainly Irish. and a handful of Italian, but mostly Irish and blacks.
Also, 34th Street, Canal Street.
Yeah,
all that was
down.
A little after.
From there downtown was you had the poor whites had to live with the poor blacks. Yeah.
Now, what was Harlem like? I mean, in terms of
Harlem, big time in Harlem was the musicians. They had the big time with the drugs and all the things. They knew what drug was, but they lived at the better class of drugs because only musicians could use drugs, and they were the ones who were living on drugs, not primarily living. The big musicians were living for the most part on drugs. It was a drug culture, but it was a drug culture when the rest of the population didn't know about it, because you had to have money to afford drugs. See, and when the musician could afford it, there was no. They had no big black stars. The Negro League, as it was called at the time, the Negro Leagues had the Negro League, which was a homestead grade and different things that were Pompey owned. Pompey, the Black Yankees, the Pompey, and they had the Cuban stars and all. Pompey ruled that, and he had a connection. And black people that weren't in the big leagues then. At that time, the Negro League, and that was with buses carrying them from here, different parts of the country, and they live in rooms and houses, guest houses. That was the Harlem that you're talking about. You couldn't make no separation from that unless you had the 138th Street and 37th Street there. By 138th 7th Street go to 144th Street, and between 7th and 8th Avenue there was Travers Row. That's about where John Clark lived there. That was Travers Row, where those apartments was.
So that was where the more
where the affluent black people lived.
Yeah.
That time there were Negroes, colored folks, and all kind of things. Negroes and colored folks. Then you don't refer to nobody as black in those days.
Negroes and colored.
Oh yeah, man! You call somebody black, you throw a picture on them. You can't talk about being black. You can't call somebody black. You can't call them African. You had to be only the Garveyites. The Garveyites were proud of being black and proud of being African. Nobody else.
That's amazing. In other words, when Marcus Garvey came here, the consciousness of black people was like what?
Was low. Everybody brag about having some white person in their ancestry. They couldn't tell who the white person was, but they brag about who raped the mother. That's it. Look, when the black man had a white man, it was rape.
Yeah,
it was rape.
But black people didn't brag about it. They weren't proud
of
it.
They brag about they were proud of it. They were proud that their mother slept with a white man. That's why they brag of their white ancestry. That's how they're going to get a white ancestry. How else were they going to get a white ancestry? More than the mother was a cook for some white man or something, and he went to bed with her. He went to war with pressurizing her.
And the consciousness of black people
was low.
Was that low?
They didn't like themselves. They saw themselves as piggy-headed, nappy-headed. They couldn't find a hot comb as fast as they could get $1. It went to the hot comb, and then they come with the concholine and all the things. That was the straighten up of the hair. They put a thing called concholine and straighten out your hair. Black people were ashamed of themselves for a long time.
When did the consciousness and how did it begin to change?
Garvey changed it. Garvey, before Garvey, but on a very minor scale, was Captain Delaney and others like that had been doing the work that Garvey had talked about. Captain Delaney carried back a number of Africans to Liberia at his expense. And he owned a boat and different things. He was a very wealthy man. And he was before Garvey. There were a few men, but not on the scale that Garvey used, none of them attempted it. Garvey was a mass scale.
Why was Garvey so effective in the Russian work?
To the poor people. He wasn't affected to the people with money. They fought him. Or the black people with some money, like the fellows that the people considered colored gentlemen, that fought to get Garvey put in jail. Even the Jews didn't go for Garvey either. Frank and all these people for the Department of Justice were predominantly Jews, and they were against Garvey. They put him to jail. They give him very hell. They were making the money off of the African Americans, selling, renting the property, or the few stores they owned it. The Jews, the African Americans were fronting. You saw a black man there, but in the night came the white man for the money. You saw Harlem with all these African American face, but behind it were the white man. The Italian in the liquor stores, the Jews in the clothing stores, and that's how it was.
So blacks never really owned Harlem.
Very few of them. That's why Harlem is able to now going to back to different people. They're just using the money. When the house let people go, the owners were still the white man, not the black man. So it wasn't, you could change Harlem anytime you want. The ownership of the property were not black people. Very few people, black people owned the property.
So, Dr. Ben, with Marcus Garvey making an impact and appealing primarily to the black grassroots and the black masses, that consciousness began to build. Do you remember Garvey personally? Were you a member?
Yes, Garvey had gone when I got here, but I saw Garvey in London. I saw him in his 2 years before he died. I saw him in London.
Now, what about Adam Clayton Powell?
I saw Clayton Powell here. I saw a young man. At that time, his organization, his father, Mr. Powell, old Powell, had a church downtown.
Right.
Downtown. And that church, he moved uptown.
Yeah. So you and Dr. Clark began a relationship at the Schungberg.
Well, we had a relationship and we met there often, at least twice a month or sometimes once a month. And we couldn't lecture at the Schungberg. Oh no, they had white lecturers. We could go and listen. And when we asked questions, there was always somebody to shut us up if the questions were too hard for the person responding. And these were Jews, white Jews who came uptown and lectured. We had no power to lecture. They didn't call none of us to lecture. No. We went there and listened. And when we spoke too much, we couldn't. They shut us up.
And this was in Harlem.
In the black library. It was black to a certain point.
Yeah. What kind of man was Dr. Clark?
Dr. Clark was a quiet fellow, a quiet thinker, a deep thinker. And he generally didn't have very little outbursts. And if any outburst, it was quiet. And it was restrained. He was a restrained man. I can't say that I was the same. I was a hothead. I couldn't. Things he took, I couldn't.
This is a lot of fun. I tell you what, so you said Dr. Clark was more quiet, more reserved.
He was very quiet. He was reserved. and he was able to hold. I'm sure that he had lots of hurts, a lot of things affecting him. That time he was, I think he was married to his first wife then. Long before he become a teacher or anything like that. That was in the 40s, 50s. Yeah.
So he had been in the service and was out.
He went in the service and came out, and then he married a lady, I can't remember her name. Then he got rid of her. She said she was only interested in wanting to kill him. And he married the children's mother. That's the girl, Regina and Sonny. His daughter and his son. That was the second wife. Then this woman is his third wife. The present wife is a widow, the third wife.
But what kind of impact did you and Dr. Clark have going back to those early days in Harlem?
Well, we had impact with the masses of people, because you must remember, as things went along, it come up to the 60s, I then started to get jobs. With the 60, the black people start forging forward the information about black people. And we finally start teaching in colleges. I was teaching in city colleges and individual colleges, like I taught at Marymount, at Pace College in Westchester. I taught at the City College and Columbia University Teachers College. But then I would after I taught in the day, I would come downtown and lecture on the street corner with Porkchop Davis, Arthur Reed, and Adam Couple used to stop his big car when he came from Congress. He stopped the car and jump and then join us.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, Paul. That's why Paul was popular. He had an in with people, and the average person can understand it, because he would come up an hour ladder and speak to the people anywhere on 125th Street. We spoke on 125th Street. There at 125th Street by 126th Street was Michaud Bookstore. Correct. The House of Knowledge. And at 125th Street and 7th Avenue was the Diamond, Harbert Diamond. He'd been there for years, but he was a number drop. They used to sell more numbers there that they didn't sell diamonds for years. And I used to lecture, Cook, a fellow called us Cook, used to lecture in front of Herbert. I would lecture on the other side. Teddy Shanty, used to be a fellow named Teddy, who owned 4 shanties. I would lecture, when I came down from City College, I would lecture there. When I went to Columbia University, I would lecture there. Right across the street was Chapel and Nuts in the Teresa Hotel. And I would lecture there too, right there on the south side of the street. I would lecture there. People would stop in either corner. I'm lecturing. Arthur Reed was the champion of the 125th Street in the north side.
Okay, so y'all would just put up a ladder and begin to teach the people.
A ladder and a flag.
Did you have to have a flag?
You had to have a flag. Then the police didn't bother you. But then we had a flag. We had 2 flags. The dominant flag was the red, black, and the green, the Garveyism flag.
And what was y'all teaching the people?
We teach them everything about who they were. And we went back to the history before Greece, before any nation was established in Europe. We went all back there. We specialized in ancient African history. And then we came up to the Moors, and the Moors' invasion of Spain and France and Portugal. And we spoke of the origin of Christianity when it started in Egypt and Ethiopia. We spoke then. That time people were being primarily forced into Christianity, a European-style Christianity, where a white Jesus. That the Christianity we taught were the black Madonna and Child, when Isis, when Set of Egypt, and Heru of Egypt, and Osiris was the dominant person that gave the Holy Family. Long before Jesus, we were teaching them that if they want to be Christian, then they should become not Christian, but they should become Osirian. Yes.
How did you tell them Christianity made its transition out of or came out of? Can you?
Well, we tell them. We would lecture about the story of Aset, which you call Isis, and Heru, which you call Horus, and Asaru, which you call Osiris. We would tell them the story. Tell them it goes back 4,200 years. BC. That means that it went 2,000 years before Christianity, before anybody called a Christian. And let them know that in North Africa, there were Christians before any European became a Christian. That Constantine was the first known Christian. And we were able to speak to Africans that listened to us, but they listened and didn't take note with pencils. They only take the note mentally. And you had many of the people, we had to fight them. I mean, fight in words. But because they had the economy against them, the economy was in the hands of the Europeans. And he feed you, he clothed you. People would ask you all the time, you gonna pay my rent? You gonna feed me? And they went and decided at those who hold their rent.
Could you actually see the change after y'all started teaching in people's consciousness and in their actions?
Yeah, because you see, Malcolm had come up, Big Red, had turned with Elijah Muhammad down in jail. Malcolm had started to read, but unfortunately, he was an Asiatic black man. That's what Muhammad teach, an Asiatic black man. And black men like me were put aside. You had to be light-skinned like Malcolm, or like Muhammad. You see, Malcolm's wife was a rarity. She was dark-skinned, and he wasn't the first choice of Malcolm. Malcolm married her as a substitute. He had to marry her. That isn't what he carried to Muhammad for approval.
A lot of people don't know that.
All right then.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that.
And that when Muhammad's son had told Malcolm that the woman that Muhammad made pregnant was one that he had sent there also. Muhammad was to get her ready for the ministry. But you know what happened. And that made Malcolm mad.
So, I just want to look at those masses of people that listen to y'all every week and the kind of transformation that you could actually see.
And there was people going and coming. People going, they would listen till as much as they could, and then they could go on, another group come on, There were always people.
How much teaching did y'all do? How long? In terms of hours?
We taught for hours till it get dark, really dark.
From morning to night?
For instance, I taught at school, and I would be 8 o'clock in the evening or 7 o'clock in the evening. I would be finished in my class. A lot of the classes were held late because people come to school. First, they had to work and get the money. Very few people were just going to school. You didn't have that kind of money. You had to get work and then earn money to keep yourself in school.
So actually, y'all had a university right in the street.
Yeah. Yeah. We would teach mathematics in the street. We teach mathematics, science, business. We teach anything like that in the school. We had professors at different colleges who used to come there and join us. Professor Lambert, big man, Professor Lambert. He came and taught mathematics, and he was teaching at Fordham.
So, in essence, y'all made the community a college.
Yes.
A university, a learning center.
The whole community was a college. We taught them anything. What we taught uptown or Columbia or City College or Hunter College, we taught there in the school. We brought it up there.
And taught it in the street?
At 125th. It was started. 125th Street, 116th Street, and 135th Street, 7th Avenue, Lenox Avenue, where else? And 5th Avenue.
Now, could you actually see the change in people's actions and consciousness?
We saw change.
How would you describe it?
That's why, you see, I was very anti-minister. You know why? Because the ministers fought us. That's why when I met you, I was so hostile. It wasn't that I had hated ministers, but what ministers used to do to us. You see, every week, the police would be on horses, and the horse would come right on us. The horses they used to put up the horses for a stable where Posner, a fellow named Posner, had started the beauty products, the Concoline.
Right.
And that was 127th, 28th Street, between 7th and 8th Avenue. The police used to come right there. And the Communist Party was against us. Yeah. The Communist Party would clap when the police come and chase us up the corner.
So the police actually would chase y'all off?
The police would chase them and lock up. Many of us would go to jail, lock us up in the night and leave us in that, put us out the next morning.
Just for teaching?
Yes. We were considered rowdy. We were the rowdy upstarts.
And the black ministers were against you too?
They would ask the police to lock us up.
Oh, now I really...
The ministry have always been with the police. They have always been with the system. Because they consider us making trouble. And we were always fighting against the church.
What was their fears in your mind?
Well, number one, we were against the tax. They used to tax the people. The 10% went free to the church. And we were always against that. Because it took the money from the people.
And they gave the people back nothing.
And they get nothing. You see the ministers go to the bank Monday morning with his big bag, and you see him in the bank every Monday morning. Right?
Yeah.
And the people had nothing in return more than the shouting. That's it.
So the churches were not building schools?
Oh, no. In those days, weren't. That came later. That came later. And the schools they built was to shout more. To schools and Jesus. What you could tell the children about Jesus in a school, you could tell them a church. Yeah. You make them study about Jesus. And Jesus isn't real. They're not going to see Jesus in a whole lifetime. So what are they going to do with it?
You know, that was one of the greatest impacts you had on me when you carried me to Egypt. You told me Jesus wasn't real, and then began to show me how the essence of where it came from.
The Nubians were Christians. All the Nubians you see there were Christians. Now they're Nubian because now they're Muslim because the Muslim conquered the Christian and the Muslim control the food, the food, the bread, the clothing, and the housing. That make a change.
So the people become whatever the power
eventually forced them
to become.
Yeah. And the people become Christians because of power. the white man controlled the power.
You were speaking about the Nubians, of which we went to see, and they were Christians long before.
Long before.
But are those the same, the Nubians, were those the ancient Egyptians?
Yeah, they were the Nubians were part of the ancient Egyptians.
And today they are Muslims and Christians.
They are Muslims, but predominantly Muslims. A handful of Christians, but predominantly they are now Nubian Muslims.
One day
They were conquered as a part of Egypt. They were conquered when the other Egyptians were conquered. They were part of Egypt and part of the Nubian government, Nubia.
Were Dr. Ben, while we're on this, were the Nubians and the Egyptians one and the same people?
They were the same people, depending on what part of the land that you're talking about. But they live primarily in the southern part. But the Egyptian was he looked like a Nubian. It depends on where he lived. The term Nubian were the people of the Nuba mountain who live along the Nuba mountain. It runs in Ethiopia all up into Egypt. And they populated there. That's why you got southern Nubians who live in Sudan, and you got another Nubians who live in Egypt. You got a whole millions of people that transport back and forth. They come to visit their family in Egypt. Those in Egypt go down to visit their family in Nubia sometimes.
Well, you said millions of people, so that was Nile was a highly populated area?
Yeah, the Nile was the byway for Nubian, Ethiopians, Ugandans. Who else near there? You got the White Nile starts in Uganda, which was Buganda, and what they call I laugh. You got Lake Victoria, and Victoria ain't got no lake, no place in Africa. That's Mwanza Nyanza. So when they tell the lie of Victoria didn't exist. When the people used to carry white people up there to show them where the Nile is. You got the beginning of the Blue Nile, Lake Tana in Ethiopia, and then the Blue Nile and the White Nile join in Khartoum in Sudan, and then they run out at that coming down to Egypt to the Great Sea, which is now the Red Sea. But before that, another body of water, the Atbara River, joined them in Sudan.
So that was just one cultural highway.
That's one cultural highway.
And one people.
They didn't have the states today. You live in a certain area, but not states like you got today. The Berlin Conference make that nonsense.
One of the things that I would like to ask you, because when you look at the value system of ancient Egypt, you know, where the Ten Commandments and all this come from.
The Ten Commandments, it came out of the negative confession, 42 laws. The negative confession is way before the Ten Commandments. You don't have a Jew. It was 1675 BC when the Hyksos came to Egypt, and the Hyksos brought a little bit of people hang around called Jews, Haribo or Haribos. Then you hear the name Abraham. They didn't have no Adam and Eve yet. They didn't have no God named Jehovah yet. That little group of people eventually came the Jews. There is no record of them in Egyptian writing. You don't see them in the stones. You don't see them in the paintings. You don't see them anyway when you go to Egypt.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, Egypt at that time did not have a standing army, and you can see that.
They had a standing army. They had an army that they fought their other people. They didn't have a big army, but they had a standing army. It was the army This thing, this nonsense that the Europeans give out that didn't have a standing army. Europeans didn't have a standing army either. They had, since the army, European lived under army. They had to have an army that was already to travel. But the Egyptians had an army, but they added to it when they were going out, having to go to fight other people.
But I was just looking at how their value system was so so balanced and so in harmony that it seems that if you have a value system that says that I should not even make another man to be afraid, which is one of the 42 negative confessions.
Yes.
That's a society that is really open, where people take you in and treat you.
Yes, but that was when things are going normal. But when you got time to war, they'll fight you just the same. If you come to fight me, I will fight you. But I wouldn't particularly come out to fight you and you did me nothing.
Okay, good. I'm glad you explained that, because I had looked at those negative confessions and looked at the kind of society. It was like a paradise. I mean, according to what their value system was.
Don't put more than the thing is. It was a system more formalized, more regulated. Man's behavior was more predictable. Yes. It was very orderly in that sense, but not that there weren't crimes. For instance, the law number 27 of the negative confession. There's a law, I have not gone to bed with my kind. A man speaking that he have not committed sodomy.
Right.
I have not committed sodomy. To have a law against sodomy, somebody had committed, so much so that they felt it had to be in the law that govern the country. A law against, number 27 is a law against sodomy.
So they really looked at and studied the principles which would bring about balance, harmony, and peace.
Which would regulate the society, yes.
And then those became the guiding principles for a nation.
They became the law of the deity. And the deity was both female and male. You had goddess and you had gods.
How did they become the law of the deity? How do you
The 42 negative confessions. They were said, but you said it to Ma'at. You said it to Ma'at, but it's to the God. It went to God. You said it before Ma'at, but Ma'at represented the god and goddess, the deities.
Then did the priests and pharaohs and were they subject to the same law as the people?
Yeah.
They were.
Yeah, you had. They were subject to the 42 negative confession. Everybody was subject to the negative confession. That the Pharaoh said that when he died.
But how could you keep him accountable? You couldn't dethrone the Pharaoh.
You looking for the law to make sense. Law don't make sense. Law is the belief of men. You see, men didn't always worship gods and goddesses.
Yeah.
Or man worshiped his ancestors before that.
The Egyptians too?
Yeah. You worship the dead people. When they died, it give you more reason why you honor them. You didn't have to be dead to be a god or goddess. You were alive when you be. And some people, then you carry your power with you.
But
because many men were gods and goddesses in their lifetime.
Was Osiris a real person?
Osiris was the governor of An. An today is called Cairo. Where Egypt, you see where Egypt, you go to outside of Egypt, you got An, the city of An, the city of the sun. Osiris was governor up there.
So he was a real person.
He was supposed to be a real person that turned to a god.
Why did they make him? How did that happen? Maybe just.
It is a part of the theology.
Okay, but he must have did something in his life that.
Yeah, because he acted in justice. He was an honest man. You got justice when you went to his court.
Okay. What about Isis? Was she?
Isis was his wife, Aset.
Oh, okay. So they modeled.
She was his sister too.
So they modeled their deities
According
after
to them, those people.
real people.
Yes, because Aset, who you call Isis, is Asheru's sister, and she's also the sister of Set, the bad god. Osiris was the good god, Asheru, and Set was the bad god because he did bad things. Equivalent to what you call the devil today.
And he was historically supposed to have been a real person too.
A real
this was a family.
A real person that did bad things.
So this was a family.
Yeah. Asheru, they were sisters. Didn't you know that Asheru and Nephthys and Aset were sisters? Osiris and Set were brothers. They were a foursome, four people who were brothers and sisters to the all four. And there were two bad women. Nephthys was not considered good, and Set wasn't good. Osiris was good, and Isis was good. One of each. One of each.
So actually, they looked at the makeup, the character of humanity, of human beings,
right?
And they then projected that in terms of.
And they put that out.
Yeah.
That became God, and gods and the laws and everything started from them. Yeah.
And then they could see how to balance that. But in terms of ancestor worship, was there a kind of a uniform culture throughout Africa?
Yeah, you honor the ancestors become the gods and goddesses
throughout all of Africa.
Yeah, all of Africa.
So,
ancestor worship is normal. You're gonna love your grandmother, you're gonna love your grandfather, you love your great grandmother, your great grandfather. Naturally, you're gonna love them. They're the people who give birth to you. You're gonna love the people who give birth to you.
Always.
Your grandfather go big shot.
So Egypt was not that different from the rest of Africa.
No, it was just more pronounced. It's where you got the writing. Egypt is different because the fact that you got the first writing. Egypt and Ethiopia, there is where you get the first writing. They record it. Anybody else before that is a belief. Before writing is belief. Writing make facts. You could record events.
Right.
I could tell you what a man said 300 years before. I don't live it. But the man write it down. Writing start facts.
Now, one other thing that all these European historians try to project in terms of removing the institution of writing from Egypt and putting it in Sumer and Mesopotamia and all that. But wasn't
they
that
can
just...
talk it, but it can't produce anything to support it.
Well, now they say they got the cuneiform, and
the dots. They said these dots mean this. They said so. But the evidence they can't produce. But when you take up Egyptian writing, you could see writing, actual shapes. It has writing. Don't have to be that, and this. All they know.
Many people say that that they believe that these things were created anyway and planted over there, and they not.
That's right, because only lately they couldn't produce a language. a complete language, whereas in Egypt you had a complete language. You had a writing for the priest who wrote the theological writing, and eventually you had a writing for the masses. They corresponded to each other.
So
The intellectual mass, no.
So all
The average man couldn't read, They had the ignorant poor people couldn't read. Reading and writing was a craft for the intellectuals, and you could get your child, if you were poor, given to be a priest, and he could learn. He got 40 years of study to make a priest.
What did they study?
Engineering, science, law, everything that I had at the time. That's why it took 40 years.
Astronomy.
It took 40 years because he had to memorize these things. Memory. Somebody asked me, why you could lecture with all those dates and so? I said, because I was taught to memorize. I was taught to remember what I read.
Yes.
And that's the white man. He's not taught memory. He must have paper. He has been taught to memorize.
Let me ask you, just in terms of North Africa, where that area of Mesopotamia and Sumer and all that, that was just an extension of Northeast Africa anyway, right?
North Africa ended where Egypt ended.
So who lived in that area?
Egyptians.
No, I'm talking about in the area of Sumer. Were those
Then
African people?
above Egypt comes Israel.
Okay. But wasn't Israel once a black land? I mean, black people?
It was another land. In those days, they didn't speak of black people and white people and green people. Unless they said black, you assuming. That's why I don't speak history in color of skin. I speak by name of country.
Okay.
You know the changes of the country by name. You don't. They didn't talk about black people or white people. No way you saw it in ancient language.
So they were not races in terms of color.
They were racist, but not in terms of color. You can say, because they didn't say color. They spoke about nationality against nationality. And then you will know they were racist because it turns out to happen to be that the nationality against a nationality was a white nation against a black nation. These are the reasons.
These are the reasons that they gave you the doctorate
Right.
here. Hold that for a minute. Just let me get a picture of you with your doctorate degree. How do you feel about being bestowed with that degree, Doctor?
Particularly one of all the degrees, this one because it's given to me by a black man who is the president of the city college. It's the first time a black person gave me a degree in front of a black college. I was always getting degrees by a white man or white woman, never a black man in a black college, and it means so much. That's why I started crying, because it emotionally meant to me for the first time a black man was giving me such a degree. Whereas from 90, given the time they give of my life, see?
Can you read some of them?
Well, for instance, it says, whereas Joseph Alfredo Antonio Benjamin He did his early education in public schools of Brazil, South America, United States, Virgin Islands, Cinquex, and Puerto Rico, and earned a Bachelor of Science degree, Civil Engineering from the College of Engineering and Agriculture at the University of Puerto Rico, San Germán. 1935, Master of Science and Architectural degree, Cambridge University, England in 1937. His first PhD in Cultural Anthropology, Universidad de Havana, Cuba, 1940, and a PhD in Moorish History from the University of Barcelona in Spain, 1941, and the LLB from La Salle University in Extension in Chicago, Illinois, 1954. Whereas before immigrating to the United States in 1945, Justice Ben Yohanan was out in 1939 by his father to study in Egypt and served briefly as a assistant prosecutor in Puerto Rico and was an associate professor of Caribbean and African history of the University of Puerto Rico and from 1940-42, and served as a member of the civilian contingent of the United States Army of Engineers and was a lieutenant in the United States Maritime Service during World War II, 1942-45, and also served as Associate Director for
You know what I was thinking about, Doc? I was thinking about the first time you went to Egypt. What it must have been like. What was your impression? You were a civil engineer, right?
Yeah, but I was. My parents had sent me to Egypt, told me to go to Egypt. I was sent to Ethiopia, and then when I finished with Ethiopia, I went to Egypt. My father, I was following my father's suggestion that I had to go to Ethiopia to see my grandparents, his mothers and his father. My grandmother and grandparents, both of my grandparents and my mother was in Puerto Rico. But that grandfather in Puerto Rico had a special arrangement, a Caribbean marriage. A marriage where a man could have 3 and 4 women. He wasn't a Christian. My grandmother wasn't Christian. And my grandfather wasn't Christian. I didn't come from a Christian family. My father in Ethiopia was Hebrew, Beta Israel, or what you call Palasha, a bad name. And my mother in Puerto Rico was of Hebrew, black Jews, a rarity. See, they had black Jews in the Caribbean, and she happened to be one that was in Puerto Rico. So my father had promised that someday he's going to send me to Ethiopia to meet my grandparents, because I had come from Ethiopia to Brazil. My father been assigned to Brazil to work with the coffee industry as a consulate from the Ethiopian government. The Ethiopian government was then headed by the Jasu, not by Selassie. But Jasu parents had daddy was the emperor. The Joshua was the emperor that got in the battle of in 1986. What I'm talking about?
With the attack.
1986. And he left his son, that the Joshua's son, with his daughter Zadito. And Selassie was supposed to be taking care of them. Selassie was just a cousin. Selassie murdered the just mother, or poisoned her. He arranged for the overthrow of the Jasu, but when Jasu married a non-Christian woman, married a Hebrew woman, and he was marrying a woman of each religion to keep peace in the country. Selassie then overthrew him on that basis. He and Abuna Johannes. That was 1924. And ordered that all men who were working for the Jasu head would go. So my father, if he realized if he was out of a job, and if he go home, he would be killed. So she and my mother ran to Cuba. They could get to Cuba. Then my mother made arrangement to get them in Puerto Rico because she was a Puerto Rican. She was born in Puerto Rico. He met her in Spain. Thus, my uncle or brother make arrangement for them. And my uncle brother was also a lawyer. And he make arrangement to my father to practice. And they saw my family move from Cuba to Puerto Rico. My mother, my father, myself. My mother could do anything, she's a Puerto Rican citizen. But my father had to work, and in so doing, he went to the Virgin Islands, Santa Cruz, where Puerto Ricans were living both in Puerto Rico and in the Virgin Islands, a handful in Puerto Rico. And there, my father settled down, would come to Puerto Rico and again to practice. Hello? Good morning. The weather is bad. Yeah. Okay. Yes. And then when that had settled and my father settled out there, he couldn't go home, he would be murdered by Selassie. Then he become a citizen of the Virgin Islands. But he couldn't become citizen because even people in the Virgin Islands had taken over wasn't citizens. They were just living under the American flag. The Americans didn't make citizens. America didn't make citizens until 1932. You see, we remember the Virgin Islands was black people. They got it from Denmark. They bought the island from Denmark. And there we lived, and I started to go to school. Then in Puerto Rico, I would go back and forth in Puerto Rico. I was going to school in Puerto Rico. And then my father, when I went to the college and everything, my father decided it's time now that I go and visit my family to see, because different things that were said about me, about the African and this and that. So my father said, it's about time to meet my people and see my country, to see what my culture, my country had, and in interest to Puerto Rico and the top people. Because in Puerto Rico, we had two black towns. We all black. And that was Carolina and Louisa. Two black towns, pure black. And they were next to the university town, Rio Piedra. In that place, I grew up, and basically in Fajardo, where the family headquarters were. That's the eastern end of Puerto Rico. And I start my trip back to Ethiopia when I finished visiting in Ethiopia, and the way through Egypt, because I had to travel that way. The Suez Canal was a thing that took days to go through. So I went through, but when I reached Alexandria in northern Egypt, I had to go to visit part of my father's instruction. But the only thing going to the south, the train, was no room for black people. The British had owned The British controlled England, and England controlled Egypt.
Uh-huh.
And they didn't allow black people in first class, second class, or nothing. You went in an open train in the back.
It was
Third
that
class
prejudice?
train.
It was so
I
prejudiced.
don't give a damn if a father was the captain or the emperor or the who of what country. You black. If you are black, you Egyptian. If you are Egyptian, period. If you are Egyptian white as snow, you can go first class. It was English first, other European second, white Egyptian third, black Egyptian fourth.
Boy, we have really been through something.
Oh, don't care where you go in the world, it'll come in a black-white issue. Because in the Pacific, they had a black bird. It was equivalent to the slave trade. They call it the black bird. So you said to a fellow from the Pacific, he would say to you, I never had a slavery here. You said you had a black bird. You say, yeah. I said the same thing. Different name.
What was the black bird?
The black bird was slavery.
And that was in the Pacific.
They call it black bird. Instead of calling slavery, they call it the black bird. The same. This behavior is the same thing. The white people enslaving the black people.
So this happened all over the world.
All over the world. That's why I laugh when people are saying they didn't have slavery in the Pacific. They had slavery, but they call it the black bird. In another country, they call it another name. But it was still the same practice.
So, Doc, when you went to Egypt and you couldn't ride first class, how did you get around?
Run the open third class train.
Uh-huh.
And it was open third class. But Egypt was hot.
Yes.
That the only thing I had to worry about is occasional rain. And since it was in the summer, it was all right to ride down. And I rode down.
And what did you see?
Trees, little houses, and different things.
Oh, you didn't see the temples and things then?
No, that time was in Egypt. You can't go. There ain't no such thing as a tourist that's black. There ain't no such thing as a tourist that's Arab. And the Arab had done captured in 640. But the Egyptian was captured by the English.
So when did you first start to see these temples?
Well, arrangement, I had to see the temples and the place. So I make arrangement to go south, and I didn't have enough money to pay. Well, so I pay and work, pay a little, pay, and as you go. And I got down south the best way I could, and I got south, but I got as far as one. Then I start my trip on a donkey.
Tell me about that. I mean, where'd you go?
You start to ride a donkey wherever they're going. You go with the Englishmen. It was an Englishman good enough, and his students from Cambridge. Then you didn't get a degree in Egyptology. You are Egyptologist. You work with an Egyptologist, a man who was known as an Egyptologist, and you study with him. When he say you finish, you finish. But I couldn't study with him. But the best I got to be a porter with him. I asked to be a student, but no. He said, Snow White. Snow White, we don't have a name for you, Snow White. That's what he called me all through my experience with him, Snow White. I couldn't protest because it was like protesting up to what? All through I went through the years that it took that was trained in learning Egyptology, learning everything. Hearing on the side, I was a porter, servant to everybody. To make fire, make this, make that, run water, run all the errands they need. When I got to learn, little, I listened. I listened to what they were learning. And when they studied this and that, I followed. And so I learned.
What year was this, Doc? This was 1930?
32 and so forth.
That was almost 70 years ago.
Yeah.
That was 6 to 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And how long did you study?
I'm 82.
And you've been studying?
I have never stopped studying. I am studying from the time I'm 5 years old. I've had a book in my hand because my parents do it that I had a book in my hand.
Mm-hmm. And you even got a book here this morning talking to me and writing at the same time.
Yeah. I don't put down the book normally. I keep studying. And that's why I write so many books, because it sounds impossible to people, but they don't know me. I just don't stop writing. I do two things at a time, at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But when you first went to Egypt and you were acting as a porter, that's the only job you could get and so forth, did you already have your degree?
Yeah, I graduated in Puerto Rico at 24, and 6 is 30. What am I was born 1918. 18 and 10. And then 28. Yeah, it was in Puerto Rico.
Yeah. So you already had your degree. So you really, when you began to see these temples and things,
was when I went to Egypt.
And what was your impression? How did
well, I couldn't understand it. I didn't understand that people were building such things. Mm-hmm. I saw them working on places. They had done build it. You know what I mean? The Egyptians were then in captivity. They were then under the British. Mm-hmm. And they had served under the British, they had served under the French, they had served under the people from southern Europe, the
Romans.
The Romans, they served under the Greeks, they served under people I want to remember, the Turks.
Yes.
Every one of them been in there. After the Egyptians, after the Persians, after the Syrians, all of them had come in, did their thing, and gone out.
Mm-hmm. At the time, did you know that the ancient Egyptians, when you first began?
I know they were black. It was obvious the people were black.
Oh, so you knew they were black?
Oh yeah, you could see they were black. Mm-hmm. You could see them, and you see the people without the power, and hear the stories going. Mm-hmm. Then the English was. I treated them as the owners of the culture, but they were subject. The English are subject them. Mm-hmm. The English were the big boss over anything, including Europeans. The English was the boss.
Mm-hmm. So you saw these temples. You didn't understand their purpose and everything.
I know what they were saying, but the full meaning.
Yes.
Didn't come to me yet. But when I started to study, and I realized that the English was there to study the same people they had enslaved, that the people who they had enslaved, it was their history. It was the Nubian, the people they call Nubian, and the people, and the subjects. Mm-hmm. And the Nubians had not become English citizens. Mm-hmm. They never would consider that, because England didn't give them citizenship to nobody. Mm-hmm. It is the Civil War, when the Arabs overthrow the British, Nasser and them overthrow them. They people grab their own citizenship. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was just wondering, I looked at my own impressions of the temples and things when I first went to Egypt, and the impact it had on my thinking. And I was just wondering what that impact was on your...
Well, I was not as sophisticated a person as I am now. But as I realized very fast that this was oppression like it was in the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. The same oppression that I was feeling from the American government. Mm-hmm. Being in the Virgin Islands and being Puerto as a boy, I felt the oppression of the United States. The United States was a conqueror, was a colonizer, still is, in regards to what they call Puerto Rico or what they call the Virgin Islands. It don't make a damn thing what name they use, the oppressor. And I know what that was. And I saw it in a harder stage in Egypt.
So you knew, felt depression. You knew the oppression the same there as here in America.
The same thing, just more severe. The British colonialism was more severe than the American colonialism. But the fact that the American had fought the British doesn't mean that they were still white. It was two white men, and they never did accepted of the black men as their equal. And more so, it's a black man's country.
So you knew that Egypt at the time was a black man's country, but they were oppressed and dominated.
Yeah, but they didn't deal in that. They dealt with if you were a Muslim, you were supposed to be even. Muslim was equal, but then it came when Muslims started to fight Muslims. To me, it was always obvious. I could never accept Islam like I didn't accept Christianity, like I didn't accept any of those colonial religion. Christianity had stopped from being Egyptian long when Constantine converted. The Europeans took over Christianity. And Christianity stopped from being a black man religion and it became a white man religion. The power stood in the white Christians.
I was just trying to look at your young years in Egypt, studying and growing and understanding. But I
was studying irregular, just hanging on with these white students, 7 students and a white professor. And I was indirectly studying, but not studying. I wasn't officially studying. I was a helper. That's the best I could become there. I don't give a damn if you were Arab, you couldn't come nothing else but a helper. You couldn't be a student. There was no such thing.
For black people.
For black people, or non-African, non-European, and non-English couldn't be. You either was a British or you were nothing.
So the British controlled the whole study of Egyptology.
They controlled Egypt.
It was their creation, so to speak.
It was their creation.
What were they saying in terms of, as you listened about the people who created it? Did they ever...
that never come up.
Or it never came up?
No. Why do we need to do that? They done captured the place. And that wasn't not to discuss with the public.
So their primary focus then was on...
getting what information they wanted.
Okay. When did you begin to really dig deep into that history for our people and for yourself?
When I was working at the United Nations. I had come back here. I had started work. I had worked as an engineer for years, as an architect, a draftsman for years, and so forth. I have been working there and did some work for the United Nations, and I did some work on colonial study in Egypt. It wasn't to be But when I documented and involved all the Egyptian things that I involved, I was told that it was so well, I had such knowledge of Egypt that I should shift to Egyptology. And then I shifted. But I wasn't particularly trained as an Egyptologist. I shift my training, shift my work. I was never trained as an Egyptologist.
So you were really self-taught. You trained yourself.
Oh yeah, in Egypt. Everything I trained myself.
And everything you could get your hand on relative to Egypt, you
Egypt,
begin
I
to read.
study. I read.
And then going to the temples and...
Then that going to the temples, accidentally when I went with the men, with good enough, this Englishman and his students. Where they went, I went, but as a secondary issue, and I learned everything as a secondary person. They weren't paying attention to me if I was learning or not, because number one, I couldn't learn. I was black.
Ah, so it was like you
Being
weren't even
black,
there.
being black, you were just nothing. Nobody you didn't ask questions. You listened.
And they talked as if you weren't even there.
They didn't take black people as students. A black man was nothing.
How did that make you feel, Doc, realizing that they...
Just like the slave felt. I didn't feel no different than the slave in America felt. I was under the same condition. I learned because I had to learn, not because people were teaching me.
You know, that brings me to a point. A lot of people say to me, why you spend so much time going back, you know, in the history and all that, man? We've been getting our ass kicked today. Going back, studying all that history and going all back to Africa and
Because
Egypt, that ain't going to help us. What do you say to
It
people
means
like
no
that?
person. I don't discuss it with that person. I just listen to him. He's got a different function than me. He got no pride in being black. He gave up his pride long ago. I didn't give up mine. I am proud of being black. I am proud of learning everything that black people did.
What is the benefits you think that we occur mastering our history?
Being a better, mastering my history make me more knowledgeable of myself, better of myself. I'm more of a man. I'm a whole man. The more I know myself, the better it is for me. If nobody else, just for me, I'm satisfied. Nobody. It got to mean nobody. I don't beg nobody to feel proud of my history. If they don't feel proud of my history, it's okay. It isn't my history. Learning my history is independent and nobody else. If you don't want to learn, you don't want to learn it. I am not asking you. I'm not mad with you because you don't want to learn it. Can
we be free as a people without a knowledge of our history?
Yeah, well, no. But you naturally don't need freedom. You got to know yourself to need freedom for yourself. And you can't ask for freedom if you don't know yourself.
I don't understand.
You don't know you are locked up if you don't know yourself. The average black person in the street there don't know he's a slave. The average person don't know he is in slavery. The average Christian, even though he's a minister, don't know he is a slave to the Bible. Don't know it. When you know that you're important is when you could remove yourself and think for yourself. Can't think for yourself being a slave.
And unless you know of the time when you were not a slave.
Then. Unless you see pride in your mother, pride in your wife, pride in everything you do. Like me, I don't steal from you. You know why? You're not good enough. You know how nothing works. I steal. If I can't buy from you on negotiations with you, I don't steal it because you're not good enough to steal it. You're not good enough. I can't little myself to steal from you. And I will always have to be holding to you. I can't be that.
You know, Doc.
I quit my first wife. My son, who is now a lawyer, one of the big lawyers in the Bronx. I was in law journal. When he was there at the thing at the
Meg Evers.
The dark son, the dark one. You been there? Yeah.
No.
The dark son, the darkest of my son, Junior. His two sisters, one was there, one wasn't. Ruth and Naomi, the twins. I left my second wife with those two children because where I was going, she wasn't going. Her mother was, Miss Austin was a BrotherRonn. That's a white church with black members. Was an all-white church. All the ministers were white with black members. And I couldn't live with it. As a result, I had to leave my wife and the children. And I supported them through the courts. They run my ass. She run me ragged. When I got a job, a draftsman's job was paid more than the average person was making, they kept me in the court. And make life miserable. It's later, much later, when I went and claimed my children. Because I told my wife, if they kill me, they gotta kill me to keep me from my children. And I was going to see my children. And I was going to see them the way I wanted to see them. I was mean about it. And I told her I was going to kill the family and myself if they didn't want me to see my children. And my wife was scared. And so I solved my problem.
Doc, a Jew told me, says, y'all, you know, the black man will never win. And I said,
win what?
This struggle, this battle.
He
said,
he's right.
He said, you can't win. I said, why? He said, you can't win for two basic reasons. He said, number one.
You don't like yourself.
He said, number one, your woman is against you. And number two, your children are educated by your enemy. So how you going to win?
Your children can't like you. Their values are your enemy values. He's right. You see, the Jew got an institution separate. Take Christmas. The Jews aren't taught Christmas. They still got Uncle Max, the Hanukkah man. They don't. A real Jew don't have a Christmas tree. All the symbols of Judaism. And that's why I said it's a joke. When they had the Jewish guy running for vice president and the Orthodox Jew, he had to, the very high days, he couldn't be there. He had to go to the synagogue. It was a joke. They couldn't let go in.
You're right.
Couldn't win.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I see Malcolm down here on this picture, where you are now. We was out at 22 yesterday.
Yes.
And you were telling me that Malcolm would come there and y'all would talk.
Yeah. And the general was a third fellow. The fellow teaching at St. John University out in Long Island, Matthews. Les Matthews. I want to make sure that I said always to put his name because people would think it was a personal, special band with me. No. Malcolm had liked me and Malcolm liked to speak. And he would speak to anyone that had something to tell him or not. It just so happened at the stage he had reached in, he didn't speak nonsense because everybody who was speaking to him had something to say.
So he was a sponge. He was learning, soaking.
Oh yeah,
all
Malcolm.
the time.
Malcolm was always learning. Always reading and always learning.
What is the main value? And then I want to look at some of the volumes that we was looking at yesterday. But what is the main value that can be grafted to our strength and dignity from learning all of this work that you have put together?
Well, number one, to learn who we are. To learn what it is we give to the world. That includes writing. That includes language. The first language, the first alphabet is still here. I wish the volume that I'm doing that have the alphabet is up at the typist typing. I wish you could accidentally call then I tell her to come down. It's due to be here. It should be here. Then you could see it. They got the language, what language developed to the world. Chinese, everything. Everybody's language is right on two plates. And they developed language. We developed the first house out of masonry material, stone houses, the pyramid. We developed that shape. There's 101 pyramids in Egypt and 44 in Sudan. We had a set of laws, basic laws from a god and goddess, from the deities, which man couldn't violate. We had the first regulated acts of society which were not transferable, which man was not allowed to change, came from God and goddesses, came from the deity. And then we believe in a hereafter. There was a life after you die. That was the big thing. We were the first to come up with a belief, a theory. I don't know any man who knew a God, so I know he didn't get it from God. But he said it came from God. His belief, his belief.
Is there anything out here today that we are looking at, are involved in terms of civilization, government, law, architecture, religion?
No, we start on the platform established for Egyptians and Ethiopians, but we are gone far from anything. There is nobody I know who practiced that. Even the Egyptian, well, the Nubian people, they have changed. And today, the position that God took yesterday, money takes today.
That's what I was going to ask you. The basis of everything we got today was really laid down.
It's money.
Yeah, I know the basis of the value system is money, but I'm looking at the civilization. The basis of all civilized arts and science really come out of Africa, out of Egypt. Is that true?
Well,
I mean, we build on it. We can go to the moon, but we couldn't go to the moon without first.
First, you had to have mathematics. Yeah. The Africans in Egypt provided the basis of the Western society now. The Africans started what is today called Western civilization. I got a book called African Origin, Mother of Western Civilization.
And you also have a book, and you've done lectures on the African origin of Western religion.
And Western religion.
Right.
Yeah.
So Africa is the foundation.
Oh yeah, Africa is the foundation of Western thought. There is no Western thought unless that the Greek brought to them, and they brought to them from Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And the first Greeks that were educated, Hippocrates and Socrates and all of them, came to Egypt to study.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And got their education in Egypt. And they got their education as grown men, where the Egyptian took a boy from the boy age and put him in the school to study, and he grew up there, took him from his parents, and trained him. The European didn't have such thing. Mm-hmm. They came as adults to get the same education they teach boys in Egypt. Mm-hmm. The Grand Lodge of Luxor is still there.
Correct.
That Alexander, later comer, they had his name put there. The Karnak Temple in Luxor is still there. It's still the largest, what do you call it?
University system.
No, education system. I think was the last theosophical education system in the world.
Now, when you said theosophical...
Theology.
All
theology was taught there. That's where people were brought to train as priests.
Mm-hmm.
And it took 40 years. 40. The number 40 years to train a priest.
How many people would be enrolled in say, a university system in Egypt like Luxor?
I wouldn't say. I'll be assuming, but you were picked. You were selected by different priests. If you indicate agility to do certain things, depending on the priest, you will ask for your mother was asked that they want you. Who will say no? Who? Our mother was glad. You don't have to feed you for the rest of life and everything. And she was a proud mother. Everybody was glad to give the son or the daughter to the priesthood.
So the priesthood was primarily the moral, spiritual, and political.
You didn't have a sex. Some priests had, but majority of the priests voluntarily give up sex. You weren't compelled by a law. You just give it up.
Well, so
the priest did not live with women.
But the other people in the society, the other men could have more than one wife in ancient times, couldn't you?
You could have as much wife as you could afford.
In Egypt?
Yeah, anywhere. They wouldn't allow how much wife you could have.
When you look at the pyramids even today, Doc, many people have studied these pyramids, and they cannot, as of yet, encompass everything that is inflected in the pyramids in terms of its engineering,
they can't
spiritual.
Because much of the science is lost.
Mm-hmm. What, if you had to give kind of a summary looking at the pyramids, what could you say about them that our people may understand as an ancient people?
They wouldn't understand.
Tell me some of the things about the pyramid.
Well, if I start to speak about the pyramid, I would have to speak about its godly concept involved, the philosophy of the pyramid before I speak over the pyramid. You got to understand that the people who built this thing had a philosophy, and without the philosophy, you can't build it.
That's very important, and I think that's where we have went wrong. So I'd like to know some of what that philosophy entails.
Well, if you are in the craft, the Egyptian craft, that's an organization dedicated to Egyptian building. And you to learn the craft and what it stands for, you understand. And the things that it reveals, for instance, I am a member of craft, and I don't tell many people. I wear a certain symbol, an occasion, I address it. And I put it around my neck, and people say, it's a quaint looking little thing. I says, yes. Mm-hmm. But anytime I see it, I know it. And sometimes people hit on me, and I hit back on them. And I know them. They know me. We don't have a big organization where we meet in a building, but we meet wherever we can. And we learn the principles behind the pyramids. And those principles, they are revered. We don't have no women members. And it is a masculine organization. Because we didn't have women because women were the mother of our children. And the women never worked. Women didn't go out to work. That's Western. Women stayed home and studied, never worked. And she still don't work in Egyptian man family life. I never figure my wife working. So my salary, the income we live in, is never based on the woman.
That philosophy, that purpose for the building of the pyramids, can you talk a little bit about those principles in terms of things that we need to understand today that would help us structure our lives?
Well, one thing you know, you could never have a child. You will never have a child without a woman.
That's true.
And therefore you know, for a man to go with anything to have a child, it could never be another man. For a woman to have a child, it could never be another woman. That's the only way you have a unique family. You can't duplicate it. It must be a father and a mother. From that you start. The woman never go out the house to work. You are bound to support her with whatever ability you got. And you must respect her as such. From there on, we start with that as a foundation. That's the beginning. If you don't start with that, forget it. If you're not willing to follow that rule, forget it. And we live in it. Those of us who are members have to follow that till we die. We follow that rule till we die.
So basic foundation was that a man supports his family, builds his family, must support the family, must build for the family.
Must build for the family.
What is...
He has no future without the family. Because you have no future if you don't have a child.
That's true. And the other part of that then is how does he see the woman? What place how does he
He
hold
has
her?
the
in
woman as the first law. She is the first. She was the first goddess he ever knew.
Mm-hmm.
And will be the last goddess he ever knew. As a man, when the first thing he did was this.
That's right.
Until she put the breast in his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing he did. Up to now, the first thing a man do, a child,
That's right.
want the breast in his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
He wants the breast in his mouth. The first thing. Up to now. And if we watch nature, we don't have to ask the question. The woman has become second-class citizen because she allowed it.
What do you mean?
All she had to do, she didn't have to give him her breast.
But she wouldn't
He
exist.
would have died.
That's true.
He would have learned, unless she gave the breast, he is nothing.
Then our first goddess is
There
our
was
woman.
always a goddess before there was a god.
Then are you saying that even today the black man has to worship the black woman?
Oh yeah,
Worship her, Dr. Ben?
worship her. That's the biggest problem. We can't follow the white man and do what's right.
When you say worship, what do you mean?
Worship her. There's only way to one worship, and that's to worship her.
So we have family. I'm just going to paraphrase it. We are to take care of that black woman in every way and respect her.
In every way. See, you can guarantee if you fall sick, she's going to take care of you. You can't guarantee a man going to take care of a woman when she falls sick. The woman takes care of her family. It's in her nature.
But that is an assumption that the woman is acting out of her black self.
I
Sisters today.
I say the woman, and I'm not qualifying it, the woman.
Mm-hmm.
Ma'at. Laws of Ma'at.
Wonderful. What were those laws? And why did they make them feminine?
The 42 laws of Ma'at. Number 27, I have never permitted sodomy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a big law.
I'm going to read all of those laws
Yeah.
into this interview because when you look at them, what you have is the foundation for harmony,
Yes,
balance,
yes.
love
Everything.
is there. But those laws are very difficult to adhere by.
They're not difficult. Difficult to those who don't want to adhere to them.
Mm.
If you want to adhere to them, they're not difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to make them your value. See, anything that you have to do becomes difficult when you don't want to adhere to them.
That's true.
All right. Yeah.
That's true. If you don't want to adhere to them, they are difficult because you're fighting against your will.
Yeah.
And if your will is not to do right, then you are in problems.
You always got something else behind your mind.
You can't bring the body in submission to your will that wants to go somewhere else.
All right.
Now, so we have you've given us really, Doc, two very basic values and principles for the black man to reestablish a control over his family, and that is treat his woman correctly, provide for her.
I go to Al Sharpton as many Saturdays as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, when I have free time and I unique. I just have time I could go there and enjoy myself. I don't send not much a wave and that's it. I have nothing to say. And I listen. And sometime in the sermon, Cathy is going to sing. And Cathy don't say nothing during the service. But when she sings, I shout and everybody is listening. And Cathy run the place. She run the meeting with her voice because of her voice. Cathy knows what she got. And she don't say a thing. But she keeps all shouting. And he keeps Cathy going. He will go everywhere. But he comes, he asks, how is Cathy? First thing you find out, how is Cathy? And there was a time when Al didn't have money. And the money that Cathy saved from singing used to keep the family going.
Let me look at some of those other foundational principles. I'm centering around the pyramid because I think you are absolutely right. If we don't understand the philosophy of why these temples and structures were built, then we can't. They won't mean nothing. You can go there and look at them all day long, and they're just great buildings.
And when you finish, if you want to know, read those books. See the pyramid text and the coffin text? They're all there. Those cost thousands of dollars.
The pyramid text and the coffin text.
Those books cost thousands of dollars. I bought those books some 50 years, 60 years ago for hundreds of dollars. And now you can't get them. Nobody will print them. They're too big.
I love that big book. You need some help with that big book?
Yeah.
All right. That's over. How long have you been working on this?
This?
Yeah, how long have you been working on it?
I put 5 years working there. We have 5 years working there to do them. All the pictures I took. The pictures I took right there on the spot.
So these 3 volumes really is kind of a compilation of the temples.
I took them on the spot. Yes, sir. There are books in there. Projector.
You know, Doc, I sometimes wonder if our community will ever really appreciate the sacrifice, the commitment, and the dedication of men like you. And will they ever...
All the money we have is there in those books.
All the money we have?
All the money that I earn
Oh.
is in there, in my children's education, and all that thing. I got no money because I didn't want. I don't have no money because I spent it in there. So I know where my money is, where it's going to.